Just wanted to introduce myself for people who don't know. My name is Tom Yang. It is spelled Y-A-N-G, but I pronounce it Yang. So if anybody calls me Tom Yang, that means they haven't met me in person. So you could use that against when somebody says they talk about me. I've been doing vintage Ferraris. I hate to say this because now I sound like an old timer, but I still feel like the new guy compared to guys like John Terrell. It's like I've been doing this for 20 years, but I still feel like the new guy. Started doing a 330 America, put my car together, created this thing called the World Wide Web, a website with my car, and kind of have been doing that ever since. Eventually started doing it professionally with a gentleman by the name of Francois Sicard down in Ridgefield, Connecticut. He's my mentor. I owe everything to him. And so that was where it all started about 20 years ago. Since then, I still work with Francois. Francois is now 82 this year, and he's still doing it, but I always felt that if I did the heavy lifting for Francois, he would continue doing what he loves to do, which is work on vintage Ferraris. I still only work on vintage Ferraris. I occasionally work on a rare 308 or something, but I usually say if it has a carburetor on it, I will work on it. And that's where I kind of stick with what I do. But what that does here is I do restorations, and I still try to follow Francois' lead, which is a one-man show. I have a shop, a private shop, invitation only, in Hudson, New York, and try to stick only with vintage Ferrari. So it started here where Aaron was a painter that, I really like what Aaron does, and what I was saying earlier is I follow the talent. I met Mike when Aaron started working for Mike. Mike and I met, we felt that we could work together. I knew that Aaron, what his ability was in a previous shop that he worked at, and I said, I think we can do something. In my position, I look out for my clients. So if one of you own your own cars and you go to a shop, I always tell people, what vendor tells you they just do a half-ass job? Every vendor tells you they do great paint. Every vendor tells you they're good at what they do. Okay, so my job in my position is to try to find the vendors and know what the work is that's good. And what we're trying to hope to show you is what the horrors can be hidden if you don't know what you're looking for. And this is why you just need to find the right people to work on your car. It is not cheap, but there is no reason to spend a lot of money and still get crap work, because it's all hidden once the paint. It can look great. You can have cars that just look fantastic. You don't know what's under. That's what they call auction cars. Okay, so what we're trying to do is, for me personally, and it just so happens, I have clients. The car that we currently have is this GTC that they're just about finishing in paint. It's a customer of mine, and this is the second or third car, Aaron, I've done at my shop. Fourth car, lose count. But so this is what happens, is that because of what I do, it's one car after another after another. And so what I do is each car is different. Each car has its own challenges. Very rarely does a car come in without some kind of body work. I mean, these cars are 50, 60 years old, parking lot damage, cheap repairs, adds up. But what also has happened is these cars cross into six-figure cars. They have to be done right. I always tell people that if you own $1 million house, you don't cheap out on the roof. So that's part of the preservation of these cars. They're not cheap cars that you can just take down the road. Also, if you're going to do one, do it right. So that's where I try my best to look out for my clients and try to bring it into shops. Sometimes I feel like I'm bringing too many things in here, but we try to keep it so that the work moves forward. And so if you look here on this car, I'm currently doing, after that car, we have two 330s, which is also very lucky because of my specialty, I tend to stick in the same era of cars. So it's all 60s and 70s cars. So we've been really fortunate because this Series 2 330, I have three of them currently in my hands. And two of them, one is here and one is down at Mark Martin's shop. So they've been very helpful to do them at the same time, because if we can compare lines, we can create. This car is at the point of bodywork is done, they're doing block sanding, but these panels that are on here are on the other one, and we can actually show how, take patterns off of each one and know what the shapes are. When you look at a car, when you buy panels, for an MGB or something like that, they come ready-made. You just kind of get them lined up. But what the actual contours of these cars, there's no panel that you can buy. This is all made from flat pieces of steel. So what initially looks, if you just looked at this hood section without understanding, you just think it's just a flat piece of metal. Well, it's a compound curve that's here. And that is something that has to be formed from scratch. And what we do is Mark has a shop at down in Stratford, but Sean, who which was a great father and son team, Sean's worked under Mark's tutelage, as a father and son. So you couldn't learn from anybody better. And Sean is now working here. So when I knew that Sean was coming here and Aaron's here, it's like, well, I'm taking my work here because I know what Sean knows, I know what Aaron knows, and I know what Mark knows. So getting these guys, they are the dream team. I'm just the manager. So getting Mark to talk a little bit to show us where it goes is that you have a car that, if you look at some of these pictures that I have there, this is this car. So what's going on the iPad is how we found the car. It was parked 20 years at a guy's shop down in Virginia. A customer of mine found me, and we bought the car actually just pre-pandemic, but he was dedicated to the project. He knew the condition of the car. You could see what it would look like. And when it came here, we stripped it and realized that a lot of the pieces had to be rebuilt. He was committed to doing it. So this is where that process is that we're at the point where Mark's had a little bit, Sean's had a little bit, and now we're in block stand inside. So I think what we're going to do first is have Mark go over some of the metalwork so we could go forward to show up to the point where Aaron gets involved. My involvement is inspecting the car. We did we assessed what was missing, if anything was missing on the car. We bought the car, cheaper than a done car, obviously. Shipped it back here, and then I disassembled the car. So the pictures there show some of the I didn't get into all the disassembly. That's not what we're here about. And what I did is deliver it kind of like this, with windows out, everything off of the car, suspension off, because I, at my own shop, has been working on engine rebuild, transmission rebuild, suspension rebuild, replating, all the stuff that would make this into, I don't make a Concours car on every single one, but we're doing it one time and do it right. If the guy chooses to take it to Concours, well, the last 5–10% is all the work, but yet, if I'm taking the suspension off, it's getting plated the right way. If I'm repainting something, it's painted in the right colors, in the right shape, We're doing it, there's no reason to do it just because we call it restoration in a spray can. There's shops out there that just paint everything with semi-gloss black, and that's a restoration. That's not what a restoration is. So that's where all the parts are at my shop, and then we can roll this over here, and then they started to do the bodywork. Mark, in some of those pictures, you'll see he rebuilt the nose. It's really fascinating when you look closely at those pictures. If we took this panel off, which we will later, it looks fine, but that nose was cut and refabricated to fit that grill that you see here. And it's a lot of fitting. It's fitting to make sure we've installed the rubber pieces to make sure that the profile is not sucked in too far. This car, because of the damage, had an accident. Years ago. It was a ton of filler. Just layers and layers, chipping the stuff off. You could have just done it with a chisel to take it all off. But once all that's taken off, it's a 1/4 inch further in, stoved in. So there were certain decisions that we made whether or not we should try to preserve some of the steel, or at some point do we rebuild it. Also balancing out in cost.
Like Tom said, this one here, we decided on saving because it wasn't in the budget to save this panel. And the car that's down the shop, which is exactly the same as this, I'm making a new top section, which I'm going to turn into the centre of here. Then I'm going to make a lower section that comes up to there, and then I'm going to be welding it down the middle. That panel there, this panel here, this panel is going to go around here. That cutout, so this panel is going to come around here, overlap this, and then this will all be welded together, right through there to the tube. And then where this overlaps, this is going to be brought to about here. And then what I'll do is I'll turn the edging for the grille there. That's basically where the cutout's going to be for the side light on the front there.
But what I want to really, I would love to pass this around if that's okay with you. Be careful of the sharp edges.
I'm just going to grab that.
Right, be careful of the sharp edges, but I think Mark doesn't realize sometimes how talented, I mean, he does know how talented he is, but I think he takes it for granted. But this is the headlight bucket right there on the other car. Look at the details, look at the fold, where that edge comes in, this little point. Look at the way this is turned in. Look at the shrinking and the stretching to get this shape, okay? And think about whether or not you could do this. But what I'm saying, like, think of the amount of years of talent and experience it takes to make the multiple bends, curves, shrinks, stretches, and curves to make that little pocket. And that's just that little pocket on the headlight.
So each one's a one-off?
Each
In other words, there's not a jig for this?
No, the problem with
Actually,
Ferrari,
he brings up a good point. On this particular one, what I'm doing is, with the car that's down there, whoever did the really bad bodywork on the other one, they kind of roughed it out in a rough shape, even though there's rust and stuff, so I'm using that as a basis. But the left side on the other car is in pretty good shape from about here to there. So I'm using the left side on the car that's down at the shop to make patterns and all that, to do the patterns on the other side. Now, if I do something completely radical, like a complete body rebuild, there's a technology now, scanning. So, say this car gets damaged on the right side and this whole area gets pushed up into the A-post and there's damage into the door. You can take the left side here, you can scan it with a laser, digitize it, put it into a computer. There's a company up in Millerton, New York, that will take that digital information and make me a complete jig for the other side. But that's a big expense. So depending on the expense and the type of job, we have pattern gauges that I can use. A lot of this, because I've been doing it for so long, I can do it by eye, by looking at it. And every one of these Ferraris is different anyway. There's not one that's exactly the same. They all have their like nuances. Because they were built by hand.
but now remember, when they make that jig, when they scan it, they create basically a three-dimensional buck. It still takes a panel beater to make this piece that lays over on it. I mean, this is the skill. There's a lot of technology that Mark is using that helps him do his job. But at the end of the day, it's making this three-dimensional, so when you pop it on there and you look at the way it sits on this top, it's harder than it looks. And the thing is, and I hate to say this about the TV shows, you watch the TV shows, we can spot where they're making it look like they're actually doing it, but they're not doing it. You know, so don't be fooled that everybody who just gets out of, you know, and I give them credit. These schools all these trade schools are doing a great job getting these kids to go to trade school. But you get out, you have the basic understanding of metal forming, but you know, it's like great, and then now just add 20 years of experience and you might be able to get to the point where you can do this.
And actually this panel here, this one here, it got to the point where I was possibly deciding to replace it, but I managed to save it, because when these panels get worked too much, the metal gets hard, stressed, it just gets to a point where it just won't do anything anymore. And that's a secret as well, is knowing when to throw it away and make a new panel. I managed to save this, so if you can save as much as you can, it's a big plus. But yeah, believe it or not, this panel here wasn't that difficult to make. It's when you get involved with the big sections and stuff like that. So this section here, it looks complicated and stuff like that, but it's not that bad.
We should preface the fact that Mark trained, since how old did you start? How old were you when you started your apprenticeship?
Well, I was 16 when I started, but I started off at Aston Martin's. They sent me to Wolverhampton Works, which was a British rail training school. So I went there. They stick you on all the different sections and find out what you're good at. I ended up on tin bashing, which is close to panel beating, making watering cans, toolboxes, this, that, and the other. And then I went to the factory, and at the factory they put you on the different sections of the factory. So being an indentured apprentice at Aston Martin's, they had to offer me another job somewhere else. The job they offered me was making prototype stoves on an industrial estate. I just wrote a rude letter back saying I don't want to do stoves for the rest of my life. So I wrote off to Rolls-Royce and ended up, they took coaches from Newport Pagnell. They took a whole bunch of other panel beaters and they took them down to Rolls-Royce in Willesden in London. That's before the factory moved up to Crewe up in Scotland. And I learned more at Rolls-Royce than what I did at Aston Mines, because at the time Aston Mines, the only two panels that were completely made by hand was the bonnet and the boot lid. Everything else was stretch formed and then fitted by hand. But when I went to Rolls-Royce, they were building a car called the Phantom 6, which was really the last completely coach-built, hand-built car. So everything on that whole car was made by hand. The roofs, the front wings, the rear wings, everything was made by hand. And that's where I really learned a lot about shaping panels.
But it's years and years of experience working from different, the English method of English wheel, and then taking that skill and then coming here, and then working in restoration and making everything from, you know, Lotus.
Well, I met Francois 40 years ago. How long have I known you, Tom? About 30 years?
Yeah, 25 years.
25 years. Francois, he just kept sending us jobs after jobs after jobs. The last job we did for Francois was at Tipo Maserati 151 for Lawrence Oriana. Sean, my son, helped me on that project. That was a real interesting project to do. There was only one out of 3 cars. It's the only surviving car out of 3.
So what we have is Sean is here, and Mark is obviously still with, you know, yelling or telling Sean what to do, but at the same time, Sean's kind of learned how to do, and learns from his father, and I think, like I said, that's a great relationship. I think that learning from his father, and you know, there's also that father-son dynamic, but it works out really well. So having him here is just is almost as good as having Mark here, but you know, Mike is using, you know, Mark here as well, and then anytime, and that's where we're trying to spread out the work. The other car is at Mark's because, you know, instead of traveling here to do it, we just, to save time, we're just constantly trying to find a way to manage a car so that we make steady forward progress. So having the other car where Mark can work on the nose, and then this car here, what we're at now is where Aaron's come in, because maybe what we'll do is we'll take some of these panels off so you can see where the car is at this point, because when it was finally done, this is where Aaron steps in. And so there's a difference between metal shaping, metal work, and body work. The body work is what Aaron does, is refines what has been done with where Mark left it off, because when you can see that when we take that panel off, the nose still has a little bit of ripple. We're trying to save the nose, but it still needs to be smooth so that it can look like that. And what it requires is filler, but you can't abuse filler. And this is what we see. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm yelling at my TV when I'm looking at the shows, and they're just buttering it up, like you know, just laying it on. And I was like, if I were my car, I wouldn't pay a dime for that kind of work, because it should not really be any thicker than a 16th. There are certain areas that you are going to an 1/8, but you know, I've seen places where it's just slathered on thicker than anything. That's gonna crack, that's heavy. You could put 100 pounds of filler on a car and not even know, because when it looks like that, they all look like that. You know, they all look like that once you do the paint. But the proof is when you look at here, and I'm gonna have Aaron show you what he does to get this car to this side. He's worked on this, the left side and the right side. If you take a look, just see when you get a chance, as Aaron's talking.
That's only a flesh wound.
Just before Aaron starts, just so you guys know, while he's telling you, take a look down the side of the car and look at this line that bows in, okay? And then take a look at an American car and how straight it is. In order to make this curve, this curve, you have to start way back here and follow it in there, or else I've seen cars where it does this, because the guy's not paying attention. So it's a lot harder. Again, it's these things that you don't notice until you point it out, and then you start understanding why. You know, Ferraris, you're not getting Ferrari tax because it's Ferrari tax. It's, you know, where it costs more. We all own Ferraris. You always think you're paying more just because it's Ferrari. No, it's because of the way they're built. You know, if it was an American car, that's the line they're doing. There's a whole different compound curve. So I'm going to let Aaron explain what he's done here.
So, all right, bear with me. I'm not very good at talking about myself.
Soil.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start where Mark left off. So Mark will send me the car and he says, okay, I'm done, come down and look at it. And I say, you know, you're out of your mind, you tell me it's done, it's done. I don't need to approve anything. So what I'll do is I'll basically start skimming the car. And it's hard for people to understand that we're not using a ton of filler. Like this kind of looks like a lot, but it's really not. I would say there's points here and here where I'm a 64th of an inch. And that's just because I'm trying to get it flat without abusing filler. It's not meant really to fill a dent. All that should have been done in the metal. So what I'll do is, I'll take tape right here and I'll run it straight down the line. My buddy Omar over there will stare and I'll stare at it and we'll just keep, is that straight? Is that straight? And we'll go, you know, okay, fine, we got it straight. And then I'll take this line and I'll mix up my filler. I'll start all the way down there and I'll come all the way back here. So basically, I start here. I get big blocks that are, you know, 3 feet long, 4 feet long, and I just start working down, 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 back. And the real challenge with Ferrari comes in is that, as Thomas said, they are round. They're not just straight. It's hard for most people to see it because you're just staring at a car and saying, well, that's straight, you know, and then, but the car actually bows this whole way. So you can actually over straighten a car like this. The second thing that we always have to worry about is the gaps. So you want to block across them because you don't want to look down this car and see the front end sticking out a little bit, or the back, or you know.
Well, we always tell people that, you know, when you look at a car, I mean, it's almost like once we point this out to you, when you go to a car show, you'll never unsee that.
Yeah.
Look at the reflection down the side of the car. There shouldn't be a difference in the reflection between the door and the quarter panel. It should be straight. The only thing you see that breaking that line slightly is the door gap. But there are plenty of cars you look down and it's like a funhouse mirror. But the thing is, that's the difference, and that's what you're paying for. And there are shops that do those funhouse mirrors and sell them and charge you the same amount of money for a car that actually has been block sanded to where they're supposed to be. Now, admittedly, and I'll tell you that, you know, there are shops in this country that charge $100,000 for paint, and they're the best in the country, and they're doing awards that many of us don't even, you know, have never even heard of. But you know, that is another level. But at the very least, you should be getting a car that's straight. You know, I mean, anybody who charges a decent amount of money for a car, that's what the expectations. You know, we're not asking for a $100,000 paint job, but we're not asking, you know, whatever they charge you, that's the least of which, and you should be able to recognize as a buyer, as someone who's paying someone to do that, you should know what you're paying for. You know, you should be able to walk through here with a paint gauge and know that you can actually find metal in there. It shouldn't just be infinity when you go to it. Because when it says infinity, it could be my paint meter goes to 35 mils, so anything deeper than, so it could be 5 feet thick.
Well, that brings up a good point, because a lot of buyers and people that buy these cars are learning more about that. They'll go to look at a car to buy, they'll put the depth gauge on there, and if it's not sending a signal, just walk away from it.
Yes.
So people are becoming more educated about a lot of this stuff.
And get pictures. I mean, we take pictures of all of this stuff, so you can see. I mean, this is metal. So you're block sanding to the point where he's gone through the layer. That's how thin it is. There is no filler here. You have to, you know, and there's no filler here, but you have to kind of make up the difference, or else again, that's where the funhouse mirror comes in. If you chase it all the way down to bare metal, you can't get that straight line. You have to have filler to that, but the difference between this point and this point is less than a 16th, not, you know, a horrible weld and a big, you know, dip in there, and they just slathered it in and filled that whole thing up. You don't know until you have it in bare, before they even put primer, because there are people who sell it that put primer on it. Can't tell what's a sealed and primer.
Yeah, and we've taken in cars that we've started to strip and found, you know, at least 3 inches of filler on it. And you know, they didn't look terrible. You know, they look pretty good. And okay, well, the car is ready to be redone. We got to strip it back to metal. And there you are, just sanding it. Jeez, you're just going. It's
or chipping it off.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sometimes you can do
So
that.
Aaron's got the right side done, he's got the left side done. The next step, the roof is actually pretty good. It's, as you can see, he's already gotten started on it, and it doesn't look like it needs much more, blocking. But the next step is for you to do.
Yep, so the next step is once we'll have the deck lid on, we'll get the hood on. And basically, we put all the rubbers, the seals, the gaskets, anything that, is gonna fit onto the car. We put it in, we get it done that way. So we know when we put the new panels, but after they're painted, when we put them back on, they fit. They're in the correct spot. We know that we gapped everything, we did it correctly. It tries to take a lot of the guesswork out of it. Then, once that's done, basically we'll take it back into the paint booth. We'll put 4 coats of this very heavy epoxy primer on it. And that's basically, we're sealing everything down. We're making it waterproof again. We let that sit for a couple of weeks, and then we'll block it again one last time. We'll have it completely back together as it's blocked, so we know that everything is straight, perfect, and then it's off to paint.
And what we do together is I'm constantly running back and forth between Mar's shop or here, because we'll want to fit the grill. Because as you look on this car, the rubber is already there. We'll probably get new rubber, but Mark and Aaron and Sean have worked several times on that grill, and part of the labor is the grill comes off, the grill goes back on, the grill comes off, the grill comes back on, the seal goes on, the seal comes off. So until we get that perfect, but it's just time. But once paint gets on the car, there's no correction. We can't fix that. So that's why we double and triple check, because what will happen is all the bright work that's on this car is at my chrome plater. Okay, I have a chrome plater that I work with and knows what I'm looking for, but again, the chrome plater is adding material and taking away material, because anytime you re-chrome a piece, you have to take layers of metal back, you're adding it back on copper, you're adding it back on chromium and nickel, and that's what adds dimensionally difference to all the chrome. So I sometimes run back and have it in copper. In fact, where's the bumper? So here's the bumper. My plater, I go to him and say, look, we did this on this car. Was that the nose, and you'll see, which is really neat. This guy was a Navy guy. That was the sticker. He used to park it at the Navy Yard. But I told the chrome plater, stop the chrome. We had some more issues. We need to refit the bumper. So I did not send this to him for stripping, because he has to take all these dents out, and he's going to do this. But we wanted to see, because with Ferraris, because they're handmade, the distance of the top of the bumperette it's got to. I want it to be equal. I want it to be perfect. So we rehang the bumper. This is that copper. So what's on this bumper right now is steel, and then it's buffed pretty nicely, and then they plate it in copper. The next layer is going to be nickel, and then the next layer is going to be chromium. That's what they mean by triple plating, is the 3 layers of plating that they go. But what I did was told the plater, stop, give me the bumpers, where are you at? It's in copper. Okay, I'll bring it out here. He's already refined it. He's already taken all the dents out, he's fixed it, re-welded it, got the bracket together. He's ready to do nickel and chrome, and we gave it to Mark refitted it.
The other one.
So you can see these are bolted. So you can see we're checking the distances when this goes back on that car. These slide into the receiver holes over there on that car, and then we check to see how far this slides in. Again, it's another step. It's just, this is where the time and materials comes in. It just adds up, because we're making sure, because again, if the body and the bumperette doesn't fit, something has to be modified. So we either re-weld the bumper brackets, or we re-massage the bumperette, or we actually go to Mark, and Mark changes dimensionally the nose of the car itself.
And there's plenty of adjustment in the
side
brackets.
to side, front to back, and that is some adjustment, but there are times that he's actually had to change the profile literally of the steel nose to fit something.
Or the bumper.
Or the bumper itself. You decide which one's easier and more cost effective. But that's what that looks like.
Or what one's correct.
Right, or which one's correct. And again, it helps to have 2 cars, because we'll go and look at let's look at the other bumper. Because I guarantee you, with these little dents, some bumpers are so twisted out because they had an accident, the guy just straightened it, put it back on the car. So you don't even know what the right bumper is. So it helps to have a couple cars so you can see, well, what does the right bumper look like? What is the correct, where does it really sit? Does it sit above the grill? Because I know that this edge lines up with the bottom edge of the grill. So that bumper lines this curve all the way around and is just here. I've seen, you imagine you get into an accident, that bumper gets knocked up here, and the guy who doesn't know is rebuilding the thing and gets his chrome plater and they put it back in the car and it's a ½ inch above the opening of the grill. It's wrong. So there's a lot of little details that we spend countless hours staring and fixing and resolving. So,
Very true.
so that's kind of, you
Does
know,
anybody have any questions?
yeah, any questions, anybody?
So how many hours are on that front end, roughly?
What, this one?
Yes.
I just got to get on the second build.
Yeah.
I'm going to say about 270 hours, something like that.
Yep.
Tom, from a judging perspective, is there such a thing as over-restoring?
These days, the restoration guys, as far as FCA judging, they keep over restoration as a point deduction in their back pocket.
Well, I guess that,
You know,
I guess some materials probably don't even exist anymore.
Right,
Like
right.
you can't use lead in
Yeah.
cars anymore,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we leave
So
a
how
lot.
do you do that? And
Well, that's a good point you bring up about lead. Lead is filling in bad bodywork. Porsches use it a lot, Rolls-Royce use it a lot and all that. Rolls-Royce, they have seams up at the top, at the bottom of the A-post, the lead's about that deep. If the car caught fire, there'd just be a big puddle of lead on the floor.
but I guess the point is like you were saying you want it perfect.
Right.
Somebody might have showed up to the Ferrari factory one day with a hangover.
Right.
And they probably didn't leave perfect,
But,
right?
but-
You know what I'm saying?
I agree with that, but what I do have to say though, because I've seen several, and again, there's three different manufacturers that I've seen, because you know, everybody knows that Ferrari of this era, not the newer cars, but this era, they were either built by Scaglietti or they were built by Pininfarina. The other ones were touring or older cars. You very rarely see touring. Touring is probably one of the best bodybuilders out of all of them, but Scaglietti was the worst, and Pininfarina was kind of in between. And believe it or not, Pininfarina did a pretty good job. Their door gaps were pretty good. I mean, some of the details and stuff were you know, underneath the welding and all that stuff, maybe not as good as we can do today. Obviously, they're gas welding or now TIG welding and everything else, so we have a lot better processes. Mark can gas weld as well as a TIG welder, but
The trouble, actually, that brings up another point. The trouble with gas welding, like used to gas weld a lot of bodies together, you use a flux. Flux is very corrosive.
Right.
If you don't neutralize it with vinegar, it's a problem. I mean, it's great on like a complete front nose before you put it on, but welding up onto the A-post and stuff like that and joining it all and everything, you don't want flux in there.
right. So the new processes with TIG and MIG is taking all that out. But so what I'm saying is that the gaps, the way the bumpers fit to the body, they did a pretty good job. What the problem that we have is just, you know, parking lot dings, bad body work in the future. I mean, you know, you're looking at 60 years of life. And what car, you guys probably have a 10-year-old car that has some kind of thing that you probably fixed and had repainted. Well, think about it 30 years from now. Like, you didn't tell the next guy that you had that little fender bender that they resprayed the front fender, but it goes on 20, 30 years from now, all of a sudden we take the paint off, it's like, oh my God, this car's had 3 accidents.
Yeah, the lead used to be done in a factory environment, right? When you do lead work in a body shop, there's not many people left around that do that.
Also, it's new steel. It's new steel, new lead. Now what we're doing is microscopically, even if you took it all off and put lead on it, you still have something in there that...
The Ferrari used to spray the lead on. It's spray. Because to do lead, you have to tin the surface first. You have to tin it. So they used to have these big heat lamps that used to go on the side. They had it's like a spray gun, but it's for lead. They had a heating element in the bottom. It would get hot. They would spray the lead on the side of the car.
I don't think they were wearing respirators back then.
No,